Adam Schefter at ESPN says there's 275,000 people.
Well, that was some party in downtown Detroit. 775,000 people shattering the NFL draft attendance record.
This is the future.
All Grits.
Evolution. This is the future.
All Grits.
Evolution.
All Grits.
All right. Hey, welcome into Off the Cuff. We are doing this collaboration style. So we're going to be bringing in special guests tonight, and we're going to be talking about the pregame warm-up. It is the Detroit Lions taking on the Tampa Bay Bucs rematch. Number 2, the playoff scenario all over again in Ford Field. It is going to be a banger of a game, and this is going to be a banger of an episode. We've got a couple of guys that have been doing this for quite a bit, talking about the Tampa Bay Bucs, and they're going to have a lot of information to share tonight. But first and foremost, I just want to send out my warm sympathies to the Schmidt family. Hall of Famer Joe Schmidt, former Detroit Lion, passed away at age 92. And, man, he helped us to get to the last couple of championships, right? Was with the team from 1953 to 57, coached the team later on. What a legend, a Lions legend. And he will always be remembered and part of the Detroit Lions family. So my warm sympathies out to his family and friends. And, of course, the Detroit Lions family. So without further ado, let's get the gentleman in the house, right? The Cannon Fire Podcast. We have Rhett Redicus and Evan at Evan NFL on Twitter's where you can check these guys out. First, I'll start with you, Rhett. Welcome to the show, man. How long you been doing this? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, appreciate you having us, man. We started unofficially 2016. I've been doing podcasts with Evan here since probably 2015. And then the first full year of coverage for us in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was 2017. But yeah, we've been doing our thing ever since with YouTube and on the audio feed as well. We've seen a lot of different Bucs teams, which I am grateful for. And, eternally grateful that we got to see Tom Brady come in here and the Bucs capture a Super Bowl championship. That was probably the pinnacle so far. But excited for another great year. I think the Bucs have given us a lot to talk about and a lot to be excited about here so far after week 1.
Absolutely, man. Both teams kind of getting off to a rocky but a good start, right? I mean, there's some good and some bad here. But Evan, tell us a little bit about you, man. Glad to have you on the show tonight. Appreciate you making some time for us lowly Lions fans up here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Just what Rhett said, we started doing this. Me and Rhett we tried to do a podcast about all sports. That didn't really work. And we just decided to go back to our roots and sort of explore the Buccaneers thing. And ever since then, it's been fantastic. Just like he said, experienced many different eras. I've talked about a lot of losing. I've talked about some winning, though, especially lately. So it's been a lot of fun. I also write for SB Nation's Buccaneers site, Bucs Nation. So you can check out all my written work on there, and very happy to be on and happy to be covering this rematch of the divisional round here, and what I think is going to be a pretty good game.
Yeah, I think so too, man. I definitely share in that thought that this is going to be a much closer game than I think what some people are counting on, or at least that's my early thought process here. But your podcast is part of the Belief Network, so I thank you guys for taking the time to come on tonight and be with us. So right away, I guess before we get into the nitty gritty of all of this, we stole one of your corners, and I think I wanted to start with that. He won a Super Bowl with old Tom Brady, right? What is your immediate knee-jerk reaction about Carlton Davis? And I'm sure we'll talk about him a little bit later, but I'll start with you, Rhett. We'll go right to left here. What would be your knee-jerk reaction about Carlton? Like, does he present anything to this offense that you should be worried about?
He is definitely a really good cover corner in the NFL. I think when you talk about physicality at the line of scrimmage and just playing really good man coverage, he's an asset without a doubt. But I think when we talk about if this is going to be like a win or a loss for the Bucs at the end of the year, time will tell. I guess the jury's still out. A big problem that he had in Tampa was one, staying healthy, and two, kind of making the play when it needed to be made. He's, again, a very good cover corner. I think we can respect his game. There's a lot of guys in the NFL that do so. A serviceable number one corner for a lot of years here in Tampa. They're putting a lot of trust in Jamel Dean to do it this year, but Carlton was that guy for a while. I think if he can stay healthy for Detroit and he can make some plays, I think it'll be interesting for you guys to tally at the end of the year how many interceptions he dropped, because that was another very big issue in Tampa. But man, great cover corner. I liked him. I thought he was serviceable as a cornerback one. But the Bucs putting a lot of trust in Jamel Dean stepping up at cornerback one. He played next to Carlton Davis for all those years. And then Zion McCollum, who is, kind of an up-and-coming corner. Those guys need to stay healthy. But, if Carlton Davis is winning playoff games and the Lions are prosperous at taking the ball away this season, it could be a loss for the Bucs, but ultimately there's some things yet to be determined. I think it's just because right now the Bucs secondary is a lot thinner than you'd like it to be after week one. So the presence of a Carlton Davis would definitely be nice right now. But the Bucs traded away Carlton, and I believe, Evan, that draft pick was Jalen McMillan. They ended up taking there. Washington at a wide receiver. He got a touchdown in week one for the Bucs. If he can be a huge asset for the offense, and potentially these teams, meet down the road in the postseason, it could be a moot point. But I think Carlton's availability will kind of tell you everything you need to know. But I got a lot of respect for his game, and when he's available, I think he's a really good corner. So
you swapped defense for offense. You swap out a third-round pick for Carlton. You pick up a receiver who's already making plays. I mean, that just shows that you have a good front office that knows what they're doing. With these types of trades. Now, the thing that I will say, you mentioned already, the dropped interceptions, we can count one already. And he got hurt on the play. So not only did he drop the interception, but he also bruised his chest or did something to his chest, and he made it to the injury report in week one. That was my biggest takeaway with the trade, is I counted up the games that he missed, not the interceptions that he dropped. And he missed 23% of available games that he should have started for Tampa Bay. So that was my big worry. So I think he hit the nail on the head, man. He just has to stay healthy. If he stays healthy, he's a damn good corner. But it's just when he's available, which is the best trait, right, is availability. That's the question. Evan, do you have anything to piggyback off of that with Carlton Davis?
Yeah, I think the availability thing is pretty major. In his career, he's never started any more than 14 games in his career in the regular season. So just like Rhett said, when he's out there, he's pretty good. It's just the nagging injuries. It's never been anything. Luckily, it's never been anything serious. That's held him out for long periods of time. But he'll miss a game here or there. But when he is on the field, he is productive. It was a big reason why in the 2020 playoffs and even 2021, he was a big reason the Bucs were able to sort of neutralize a guy like Michael Thomas, who for years had really tortured the Bucs. And Carlton Davis was the guy that was able to sort of step up and cover him because of the physicality that he brought to the table, because of that press man coverage that he was able to bring. The Bucs didn't necessarily trade him due to a talent issue, due to anything. It was more so a salary cap thing. They did save $6 million or so by trading him, and they pick up a day two draft pick in the process. So it wasn't necessarily like this dude was struggling. It was just kind of all right, we need to make a sacrifice here, and where are we going to make that sacrifice? So I think the Lions got a pretty good corner, especially when he is 100% healthy.
Absolutely. Well, I had to start with Carlton because that is something that obviously we have in common this weekend is, we're sharing some players here and some picks, and you guys are having success with yours, and we're already having a little bit of success with Davis. So week 1 ranks, obviously you guys know this as well as I do, that this first week is nothing but frauds, right? I mean, the teams that are winning shouldn't be winning. The teams that are losing probably shouldn't be losing. And then there's kind of a mixture of both. It's like overreaction week number 1. I don't think that either of our teams fit in that category just yet. I mean, obviously there were some things that were going on that none of us really liked, about week 1. But power ranks, NFL.com has the Lions at number 3. Really didn't move a whole lot. I think we were at number 4 or 5 last week. And the Bucs at 16. Do you guys remember where you were last week before this weekend?
I don't quite remember. I do think it's been about in the 16 to 20 range, because it's funny. A lot of the NFC South teams are all kind of like, especially before the season, the Falcons, Bucs, and Saints were all kind of like bunched together, and then you had the Panthers a little bit back there. So would imagine that the Falcons have moved down a little bit. I haven't taken a look at them, but I think it's relatively not much of a huge change there.
So I think 19 as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in there.
No, you're good.
I'd seen around that same area as well, and I had seen the Falcons placed above the Bucs on a lot of people's power rankings. So I'm glad that we kind of dispelled that BS after week 1 as well.
Speaking of frauds, I do like the Falcons. I mean, they got a really good team this year, but they're going to have some trouble. Defensive ranks, which is an interesting one. So the Lions jumped all the way up to 15th. Now, I think they started the season around 19th, but last year we finished, towards the bottom end of the league in a lot of metrics. The Bucs sitting firm at 22nd. Now, when I analyze the Bucs, really, not much other than they had a third down conversion rate of 25%, I believe, this weekend, which ranked, I think, 7th in the NFL, which is pretty solid, right? There really wasn't a whole lot to get excited about after week 1 with their defense. Tampa Bay had a 51.7% defensive success rate, ranked 29th in the league. And most of their other numbers were kind of around league average. You had some big losses potentially this weekend, or I guess what could be the biggest losses. You mentioned Zion McCollum, you got Josh Hayes and Bryce Hall. They all kind of left the game on Sunday and could be big factors for this weekend. Hall is expected to be placed on IR, the last that I read. I don't know if you have any new information on that, with also a chance to return in the playoffs. That was according to Todd Bowles during one of his press conferences. Safety Antoine Winfield Jr. was also seen wearing a boot after the game, further really threatening the stability of your back end of your defense. So I guess my first question is, how concerned are you about the DB room heading into the weekend, and what new information do you have for us to be prepared for?
Bryce Hall, I think he's done for the year. Todd Bowles probably being hopeful when he talks about him being available for a playoff game. Maybe that is the case. Maybe he is available to play later on down the road, but it was a pretty nasty injury for him. So obviously hoping for the best. But looking at that defensive back room and then looking at the injury report for Tampa Bay, I think the biggest name that's going to jump out to you is obviously Antoine Winfield Jr. When you don't have number 31 on the field for your defense, you're missing a little bit of that ability to kind of make any kind of play. Like Antoine Winfield isn't just one kind of safety. He can force a sack, he can force a fumble, he can cause an interception. So you're missing out on that big playability, and you're kind of counting on some of the other guys in the safety room to step up. Christian Izien going to be the expected starter. On the other side of Jordan Whitehead, who is coming back to Tampa for the first time in a couple of years. He's a stud. But again, like Winfield he was the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL for a little while. Highest paid DB of all time for at least a little while. Highest paid DB in history for at least a little while. So he has that playmaking ability. I would say between that and then some of the guys on defensive line not being 100%, going to keep an eye on Kalijah Cansey. That could be a big loss as well for a team that needs the pass rush help. But when you're missing 31, you're missing probably your biggest playmaker on the defense there. And that's huge against, a Lions team that usually does a pretty good job against Tampa.
Yeah. So, Evan, what do you have, as far as your DB overlook here, or your outlook, I should say, on the DB room? Who's going to step up for you guys this weekend? We didn't have a great weekend. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta both kind of got bracketed and covered up. How how are the Bucs going to try to mimic, the same kind of playbook that the Rams did, missing, players like Winfield and Bryce Hall and, your newbies that got injured too with McCollum. What are you guys going to be able to do this weekend? Do you think is going to help protect the pass game at least a little bit?
Well, I mean, yeah, losing Antoine Winfield Jr. is you can't really replace him per se. He's a game changer, and losing him not just for this week, probably going to be multiple weeks. It's definitely a big loss. For the Bucs, there are some optimism that Zion McCollum will be able to play. I don't know if he's 100% past concussion protocol, but I believe today at practice he was not in a non-contact jersey, which yesterday he was. So that there seems to be some progress there. So I do think there's some optimism that McCollum will be able to go. A little bit less about a guy like Josh Hayes, and obviously Bryce Hall going to be out for a long time, and we know Winfield. So basically, look, the Bucs are going to need one of these unsung heroes to kind of step up. They're going to need a guy like Christian Izien to play well. They're going to need a guy like Zion McCollum or Tyreek Funderburk, who's an undrafted rookie free agent that they signed, made the team out of camp. He might get some playing time in this game with all the DB injuries they have. With them putting Bryce Hall on IR, they've signed Keenan Isaac, who was a corner they had with them in camp. He was cut at the end of the preseason. They just brought him back. He may have to play a little bit. So, and then obviously the big one is Jamel Dean. I mean, he's the guy who, has been the cornerback 2 on this team for a long time. He's now the cornerback 1, and he's probably going to get the Amon-Ra St. Brown assignment most of the time. So they're going to need to find a way to neutralize those guys. Amon-Ra had a big game last year in Tampa when these two teams met in week 6. And they're going to really have to find a way to neutralize not just him, but like you mentioned, Sam Laporta, because he's another guy who, had a relatively quiet day last week. And I'm sure he's somebody the Lions are going to want to get going. So it's going to be a real challenge, I think. And this is, unfortunately, this is not the week to be missing a lot of guys in the secondary, especially a guy who could help neutralize a tight end, like Laporta and Antoine Winfield Jr. When you don't have a guy like him, that's going to be up to maybe like a Jordan Whitehead, who hasn't always been the best in coverage. That's not really his strong suit. So, facing a guy like Sam Laporta is going to be a challenge. And you just got to hope that if you're the Buccaneers, I think you're going to have to find a way to get pressure on Jared Goff. I think it's going to start up front necessarily, and just hope, your defensive backs can survive.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I was just taking a look at the depth chart earlier, and I kind of had a chuckle. Please tell me you guys really don't have Graham Barton as your left cornerback as a second option.
Don't believe so.
Because he's listed there, and I'm like, wait a second. Isn't he like the center of this team? So, right now he's listed as the number 2 behind Jamel Dean. Like that's got to be a typo.
They are thin. I don't know if they're that thin though. Yeah. I don't know if they're that thin. No, actually, they wouldn't be thin. They wouldn't be thin at all if they had Barton there. But.
Yeah, Barton's a big boy. Yeah, so to round out your depth chart, this is kind of stacking up for the Lions to have some success, I think, in the pass game. It was a paltry beginning, for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and Jared Goff. I mean, he just didn't have a good day. I think that the shining moment, though, was Jameson Williams, and I think what the Rams did not expect was JMO, to show up. And I think now that kind of put the league on notice to say, hey, wait a second, we can't do that. We can't just try to shut down Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta and leave JMO wide open now. So looking at your depth chart, Jordan Whitehead, that's a big loss. Jamel Dean stepping up. Look, that's not a bad replacement. Jamel Dean is somebody that I was actually hoping the Lions would go after last offseason. More so than Carlton Davis. Bryce Hall on the IR, that's a big loss. Josh Hayes is questionable. Zion McCollum is questionable. Antoine Winfield Jr., he's doubtful. And Tyke Smith also questionable. So you've got some big issues in the backfield. But let's move forward now to the Detroit Lions for a second. They held the Los Angeles Rams to 20 points, which is something that they can be proud of, right? I mean, that's a great opening weekend stat to say that, hey, we just didn't get run all over the place. But the metrics behind it really did not paint a very good picture for the Lions overall. I mean, it's week 1, a lot of mistakes. It will be intriguing to see if the Lions have a similar scoreboard success against Tampa Bay this weekend, which Tampa had a pretty impressive opening weekend. So biggest losses for the Lions, Really none so far. The Lions may actually be getting a big-time addition back, DJ Reader. It'll be his first time on the field with the Lions in a regular season game. But although the Lions did suffer a rash of ankle injuries for whatever reason, it appears that everyone is on pace to play this weekend, barring any setbacks. The Lions should see DJ Reader inserted into the game as well. What do you guys think about our defense going up against your offense this weekend? If DJ Reader's in, everybody else is pretty much healthy. Ankles, I think they're going to be back. Afetu Melifonwu may be the only one right now that we have an issue with. And when I look at the injury report, Marcus Davenport has a groin, but even though he didn't practice, there's no talk of him being out this weekend. Penei Sewell had an ankle. He's definitely going to be in. He played the entire game. Our fifth wide receiver, Isaiah Williams, ended up on the injury report today with an abdomen issue, but everyone else is ankles, cheap stuff. Hamstring for Kirby Joseph. He was upgraded today from did not practice yesterday to limited today, so he's on a good trajectory. Let's just assume everyone's healthy, including Davenport, and Reader gets inserted. What is your immediate reaction to that style of a defense that could get a ton of interior pressure now, mixed with the outside pressure that we already have? Rhett, I'll go to you.
That turf, you got to watch out for that turf, man. It'll get you. But I kind of look at what the Rams were able to have success doing in week one. And I know you just said week one is week one, and the Lions able to make some adjustments, maybe get a couple of extra reinforcements, swap some guys out. But I thought they moved the ball fairly well through the air. Matt Stafford, 34 for 49, 317 yards, a touchdown. I know he did throw a pick, but he was moving the football. And, he almost threw the thing damn near 50 times. So it was working at least a little bit. I think if the Bucs can come out firing the way that they did last week, they could potentially find the same success. I think they're going to have to, right? I think Baker Mayfield's going to have to ball out again this week. And one of the things you had mentioned about that interior pressure, Baker Mayfield had maybe one of the most impressive QB performances of week one, I think. And a big part of that was his ability to extend plays in the pocket. The interior offensive line for the Bucs is still a work in progress. I'm sure we'll address that a little bit later, but a couple of new guys in their position. We talked about rookie Graham Barton, but Baker, man, he was literally the magic man in the pocket last week just because they couldn't tackle him. He was, ducking and weaving, and that was good to see. So I think if he can stay confident, extend plays without turning the football over, because again, a couple of costly turnovers has cost them games against the Lions before, then I think they could see some success. But it's gotta come out of the gate quickly. I don't think you can waste time and start the game with 2 or 3 and outs against this Lions team, because if you do that, you're potentially behind 10-0 before the end of the first quarter, I think.
That's a good point. And Evan, I'll follow that up with some other key points here for you. But you mentioned a couple of things, getting the ball out quickly. Stafford, man, he's one of the best to do it, right? He was getting that ball out in like 2.5, 2.6 seconds. And there's hardly any pass rush out there that is just going to close that fast. Matter of fact, Marcus Davenport had the fastest sack for the Lions this weekend. And it wasn't anywhere close to 2.6 seconds. I'll just put it that way. It's really difficult when you have a quarterback like Baker, right, who is shifty, who is nimble on his feet. He can be a dual threat. That's not his first choice, but he can move around in the pocket. He can extend and get out of the pocket. But my question really, Evan, to you is, can he, do a quick short step drop and get that ball out to Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, like Stafford was doing this weekend, who he had, 4 or 5 receivers to throw to, at the beginning of this game. They quickly started to drop, as Puka Nacua came out, but he targeted Cooper Kupp pretty much the entire game after that and had a lot of success. So do you think that Baker Mayfield can have some similar success this weekend, avoiding the pressure and finding those seams in under 2.9 seconds?
I do. I do think there's a way, with all new offensive coordinator Liam Cohen, they're still trying to work out, the kinks of this new offense. And even though, there is some familiarity with it, and you hear a lot about, well, it's a lot of a similar system that offensive coordinator last year, Dave Canales, had. Even though it's similar, it still is different. I think you're still trying to get used to that. And we saw a little bit of that, quick timing a few times, during the Commanders game. There was a couple of plays specifically, to Chris Godwin, just to get him the football, a quick out route or, a quick hitch. That's something that they're going to need to do against, this Detroit pass rush, because look, Baker had a great day, but we also have to recognize the Commanders defense is not very good. They were among the last in the NFL last year, and they just weren't very good. Baker did have a good day, though, and you need to take advantage of that. The thing I think the Buccaneers are going to have to rely on again is their screen game. And it was something that worked out really well last week. And that's another form of, I think, quick passing to get the ball out of Baker's hands quickly. It doesn't have to be to a running back. Chris Godwin is one of the better wide receivers in the NFL when it comes to wide receiver screens. And he's been doing it for a long time, especially now that he's moving back to a slot position a lot of the time. So I do think there can be some success to be had there with, quick step drops, getting the ball out quick, because I think you're going to have to. You can't rely on Baker Mayfield to just, Houdini himself, out of pressure 24/7. That's just not going to work all the time. So I do think, if the Bucs want to have some success, they're going to need to do that, but they're also going to need to be able to move the chains when it is there, right? I think you can only dink and dunk for so long before you need to start pushing the ball down the field a little bit. Just like Rhett said, especially with the way the defense is right now, we don't really know exactly what to expect from them. It's a good Lions offense. This is a game where the Bucs offense is going to have to play well, because if they don't, it could get out of hand, and then you basically are just in a throwing contest, and you have to have Baker Mayfield throw the ball darn near 50 times, which the Buccaneers don't want to do. So I do think they can have some success there, but it's all about staying ahead of the downs and, keeping yourself in those third and short situations and then converting them when you are in that.
Yeah, and I think one more thing to note, about this Bucs passing attack that the Lions just haven't really seen in this capacity before is Chris Godwin playing back in the slot here. The Bucs have relatively the same pass catchers they did before the last time these two teams met, but I think that's going to be a bigger difference maker than most people think. Godwin was the leading receiver week 1. Mike Evans had 2 touchdowns, and Godwin was your leading receiver. He was the highest graded PFF wide receiver for week 1 as well. So he's going to have a big-time year, contract year for him. But yeah, just like Evan said, getting rid of the ball quickly, being smart with those decisions, but quick reads, high percentage looks, getting rid of the football. I think Liam Cohen has definitely made that a little bit more of a priority in matchups like this, but we just got to wait and see.
Yeah, so, Mike Evans hauled in 2 touchdown catches, in the opening weekend. A revitalized Chris Godwin, like you said, playing out of the slot, and now your rookie Jalen McMillan, each snagging, each one of them had a touchdown this weekend. That performance came against, though, in from my opinion, it was a Commanders defense. It's a rebuilding defense. It's a defense that is still trying to figure itself out. So I guess I'm wondering, how much of this was predicated on a bad Commanders team, that's just not getting the right footing in the first game, versus was this a Tampa Bay Bucs offense that was just high octane, high powered, overmatched, the Commanders. And I think that there's probably a lot of both there. There's no doubting what Mike Evans can do. There's no doubting who Chris Godwin is. And matter of fact, if people are doubting Baker Mayfield, that's a mistake. I've been saying it for a few seasons now. I just don't understand why Baker was treated the way that he was, because the guy has the skill. And clearly he proved it, in Tampa Bay last season. He had a really good season. My question really, though, is Rachaad White. What happened to him this weekend? Bucky Irving showed up big time. They combined for 7 negative runs this weekend. And against this Lions defensive front, that's not going to bode well for them. We are one of the best run defenses in the league. And I guess what I would ask you both is, if you can't get the run game going, which is likely to happen, what is Baker going to be able to do if he's got to chuck the ball 50 times like Stafford? And I think that what the Lions were trying to do with Stafford, which it kind of worked in their favor and it didn't, because they were trying to make Stafford throw the ball a lot, because the more you throw, the more mistakes you make. It's just bound to happen. If you put it up 30 times, you might throw 1 pick. You put it up 40 times, I think the numbers say it's 2 picks. You put it up 50 times, it's 3 or more picks that you are likely to throw. because you get into a bad situation. So if they make Baker throw this ball, all afternoon long, that is just going to give the Lions more opportunity to win the turnover margin in this game. But also, if Stafford didn't really figure out how to get rid of this ball quickly, it would have been a much better game for the Lions. They wouldn't have been able to hold them a lot more, early in the game, I guess I should say. But Bucky Irving, 6.9 yards per carry. Great game. Why didn't he start the game? And is you expecting him to start the game this weekend?
No. I think when you look at that Buccaneers running back room, it's going to be Rachaad White's job until it is. And I think it's going to be quite some time before Bucky Irving is in the running for RB1. But that's just because, look at what Rachaad White was able to do in the pass game last week for Tampa Bay. I know he didn't show up, only 2.1 yards a tote, which has been an issue for him in the run game, but 6 receptions for 70-plus yards. So he has a little bit of versatility, but I think with Bucky Irving, his presence is going to be a big X factor in this week's game, because just like Chris Godwin playing out of the slot, the Lions haven't seen Bucky Irving, and the Bucs, to be honest, have not had a running back. And listen, this is week 1. We're talking about against Washington. I know we just said that a couple of times here, but the Bucs have not had a running back average 6.9 yards a carry in his NFL debut ever.
Right.
So this is definitely something to consider here. The offensive line goes a long way as well in what this run game is going to be able to do this week. And I think there were a couple of moments last week where, they showed that they still need to improve. Graham Barton, still a little bit green in that sense, has to improve, has to do a little bit better of a job getting to the second level and setting up those plays. Cody Malk, been a little bit inconsistent, but still looking for him to improve. And then, you got Ben Bredesen at that left guard spot. Kind of know what you have with him as well. But the way that this running back room is laid out, I think it is going to be Rachaad White's job until it's not. But, Evan, I'm curious your take on this as well, because I wanted to talk about, I don't have a lot of hope for the Bucs run game this week against the massive Detroit defensive line. And that's why I was kind of putting emphasis earlier on why Baker does need to ball out yet again this week. But I don't know if it's a recipe for success having him throw the football 50 times. So I don't know.
You do have a uniqueness though here, and you were kind of alluding to it there with Rachaad White. I think I overlooked the fact that he had 6 receptions on 6 targets for a 12.5 average and 75 yards. That is almost like the Montgomery and Gibbs factor. Gibbs can be that kind of guy like Rachaad White, where he can be utilized in the pass game. Bucky Irving might be, your guy that just does everything else in the run game if they utilize a 2-back set ever, or kick one out into the slot, which you could see it this weekend. Who knows? But I'm not going to try to forecast a way to beat the Lions. Evan, why don't you tell us how it's potentially going to happen with Rachaad White and Bucky Irving?
Yeah, I do agree with Rhett where, I don't think Bucky Irving is going to be the starting running back for the Bucs, at least in the time being. But I think, again, running the football, I do think, Bucky Irving was very impressive, and he surprised a lot of people. And I've talked about this on our show a little bit, and it's just it's a difference in running styles. And that's not to say that Rachaad White's running style was bad. It's just that's what works for him. That's what has worked for him. He's been a solid running back in this league. It's just 2 different running styles. Rachaad White's very patient, very methodical with it. Wants to find let the whole development then go. Where Bucky Irving gets the ball and he's just off to the races. He's trying to just go, and it is sort of a breath of fresh air. A little bit when you see a guy with that burst, that acceleration, just sort of go after 2 years of Rachaad White, and then even like a guy like Leonard Fournette wasn't really that type of dude that just went. Bucky Irving is different than those guys. So I think the key here, and again, the Bucs run game was so bad in 2022, and yes, they improved in 2023, but like marginally, not very much at all. The numbers show that it was better, but it's hard to be worse, to be honest with you. So,
but they were still historically bad.
Yes, it's still very bad. But they're still trying to figure that part of it out, right? And I think, you even saw that against Washington, where it wasn't pretty for some time. And like you mentioned, 7 negative runs, that's not going to fly, against the Detroit defense. That is better than Washington. Against the Detroit front seven, that is much better than Washington. So, you do wonder, if they had trouble running the ball consistently against Washington, how are they going to fare against a team like Detroit, especially on the road, where having a good run game on the road could be critical. I mean, that, you want to talk about controlling the pace of the game, controlling, moving those chains. I think, you do need some semblance of a run game. So Rachaad White in that sense needs to be better. Yeah. But we did talk about earlier about how Baker Mayfield getting the ball out. Rachaad White is a weapon in the receiving game. I mean, he was basically used as like another receiver, last Sunday. So I'm curious to see if they use him in that similar sense, just like you said with the Lions and David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs can do that stuff, but he can also run between the tackles if need be. He can show that burst. Jahmyr Gibbs is kind of like a best of both, of Rachaad White and Buggy. Right? He has that receiving ability, but he also has, that burst, that acceleration. So he's a really good football player. And I am curious to see how exactly they use Rachaad White, how they develop into these roles as the year goes on. Is this going to be how it's always going to be? Or is there going to be a change, week 6, week 7 as the season goes along?
It's definitely an interesting matchup. I think that the one thing that I'm beginning to realize here, though, is if Tampa cannot get their running game working at all, which most teams really can't, against the Lions, and if you can't get the dump off pass going to Rachaad White or Irving, get one of them active, right, and keeping the Lions guessing, because the Lions were biting at times. Barnes was biting big time on the fake handoffs, and if he keeps doing that, that whole flat is going to be open to his side, and that's where I see Rachaad White kind of picking his his opportunity there, picking his spot. And where Baker can have some opportunity to get him the ball there in the flat. I hope it doesn't happen. I just see it happening because it's been happening now for over a year. We always leave the flat wide open for whatever reason, or right in the middle of the field, where Jack Campbell should be. And his coverage skills are just not the greatest. So there's definitely some opportunity. One thing I kind of glossed over here, though, is I forgot to mention that Luke Godecki is out with concussion. It doesn't seem like he's going to be able to make it in this week. I mean, right now he's not practicing. I mean, he still has tomorrow to see if he gets better, or he could be out. So if you lose your right tackle this weekend, what's going to happen with Justin School? I mean, is he someone that's going to, I'm probably butchered his name, but is that somebody that's going to be able to trust in the right side, or how are they going to move this line around? What do you guys think here?
I honestly don't even want to think about it. You just talked about Luke Gedeke, who is a guy that his rookie year in Tampa, he was playing guard and played so terribly that they, decided to move him over to right tackle the following season. And he had a little bit of a career resurgence. And he's been, I think, a really good right tackle for the Buccaneers ever since then. But yeah, we talked about the improvements they tried to make to this offensive line. They addressed the interior without a doubt. You didn't necessarily need to address either Tristan Wirfs or Gedeke. You signed Wirfs to that long-term extension finally. But the most concerning part about this Gedeke injury is that it didn't happen during the game. It seemingly popped up during practice one day.
Yeah.
Yep. So, again, that is a loss that I think goes beyond any of the guys on defense that we talked about. Because, you got playmakers in the safety room. You got a Todd Bowles defense that I think might come with a little bit of a different approach, but that's an entire topic in itself. But all of this offensive production that we talked about, getting the ball out quickly, Baker having time in the pocket. I mean, it definitely feels like a lot of those opportunities, or at least some of those opportunities, aren't going to be there if you don't have Gedeke at that right tackle spot. They may not be running the football to the right side. We may not screen passes to the right side this week, so it could be tough if he's not good to go. But I mean, Evan, what are you thinking about Gedeke? Because I definitely think if we don't get him tomorrow, then it's already not looking great for him.
Well, it's interesting, Evan, before you answer, it's interesting. Like you said, it popped up in practice. So it literally popped up today. He was limited yesterday, which I think Luke is one of those that kind of gets a rest, kind of a half a rest kind of day after game weeks, right? Being the veteran that he is, and then he, it pops up with a concussion today. I mean, this gives an opportunity for the Lions to load up, but I've seen this before. We just had it with the Rams. I mean, they were decimated up front, and we still couldn't do what we wanted to do. So, Evan, what do you think now if Gedeke, however you said it, is out? What's going to happen to this offense now?
Yeah, he's not trending in the right direction. Obviously, after being limited, he didn't practice at all on Thursday, and like you said, we'll see about Friday. But I think it is going to limit the offense, and it's crazy that after 1 week of football, there's this much stacked up against the Buccaneers, against a really good team on the road week 2. So it's definitely going to matter. Gedeke has been a bright spot. He was a surprise bright spot, I think, for the team last year, the way he played at right tackle. And he was pretty good against Washington in week 1. So it is definitely going to be a loss. It's something to where I think Tristan Wirfs played okay last week. He didn't play great. It wasn't like the worst game of his career, but it wasn't the best either. I think you're going to need Tristan Wirfs to play better. You're going to need the right guard, Cody Mauch, I think, to play better as well. The interior themselves, I think, are going to have to play better if Gedeke can't go. And, because you're going to have to find a way. You're going to have either, Aiden Hutchinson or a guy like Marcus Davenport line up against Justin School. And that I don't know if the Bucs I don't know if that's in the Bucs' favor. So I do think that they're going to have to find a way to, whether it's chipping those guys, find ways to try and neutralize those guys, especially even if Gedeke can play. That's a challenge in and of itself. But without him, it just becomes that more of a tall task. And we'll see. Hopefully, he's able to play. But right now, it is not looking great.
Well, let's do this. I'm going to switch over to, I think, some more defensive options here. What the defense can do, defensive keys to the game. We're going to do that in about 30 seconds. After a word from one of our sponsors. Be right back. Here, and you want the latest news and rumors on your Detroit Lions. Head to sportspider.com. That's sports, SPYDER.com, where you can get your Lions news and all your sports in one place. Man, this site is packed with your favorite podcasts, live news, articles from local writers, and insiders, all updating in real time. Not just the Lions, every major sports team, including MMA, UFC, and so much more. Don't want to waste time searching? Sign up for free. Create your ultimate sports news hub. You control what hits your feed at SportsSpider, your number one source for all your sports. Visit sportspider.com today, right after the show. All right, so let's talk some defense here. This is going to be, I think, a pretty good defensive matchup for both sides. You do have an issue here with Kalijah Cansey. He was on the do not practice list today. Did he play week 1?
He did not.
He did not. So you guys aren't missing much there. Logan Hall has got a foot issue. He was full participant today. Josh Hayes, we talked about him earlier. He was do not practice today. We talked about the other cornerbacks. Tyke Smith was do not practice with an illness. And then, of course, Antoine Winfield, more than likely out for this game. So William Golston, though, full participant. So there's some good news there for the Bucs. Here's what I see happening. You guys correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to see if I analyze this a little bit right. But I see the Bucs defense trying to really limit Jared Goff with their blitz package. They are one of the heaviest blitzing teams in the NFL. Last week versus the Commanders, the Bucs blitzed 42.4% of the time, which was good enough for third place in the NFL for the most blitzes ran. Only behind the Broncos and Raiders, who were both tied at 42.9%. So really, they were second in the league. It is early in the season, and Goff clearly was not on the same page with his receivers in week 1. They were fairly limited in what they could do. Goff didn't look comfortable at times, but Goff has always been one of the better quarterbacks against the blitz. Blitzing can limit the Lions, to get into play action, right? If your blitz is working, we can't get into that extra motion. This could be an opportunity for the Bucs to really dial it up and take advantage of the early season stumbles, is what I call it. The early season stumbles out of the gate on offense. I see, number one, they exploit the pass protection issues early. I'm expecting a lot of pressure. Let me scratch that for a second. Let me give it back to you guys for a moment. What do you think about the blitz packages going up against the Lions offensive line? Is it going to work? What happened in the last time we met in the divisional round? where the Lions were able just to navigate around it and get that ball out pretty quickly. So where do you think the Bucs are going to have success against the Lions offense this weekend?
I definitely understand where your thought process is, just because, Todd Bowles, as you mentioned, the numbers are there. He lives and he dies by the blitz against a lot of NFL teams. But I'm a little hesitant about if they're going to be as blitz aggressive this week, just because this is a Lions team that has a lot of recent film against a Todd Bowles defense. And to be honest with you, you mentioned Jared Goff being one of the better QBs in the NFL against the blitz, and he usually does that against Tampa Bay. These teams played twice last year. And, it didn't feel like the Bucs were getting as much pressure as they should have off of the blitz, and he made them pay. So, I would hope that Todd Bowles kind of, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, as far as, bringing the house and the approach, the effectiveness that it has had against this Lions team in the past. So I'm curious if he's going to be as blitz heavy this week as he has been in past matchups. So I can definitely understand why you feel that way, but part of me wants to hope that, in a way, Todd Bowles has learned his lesson by now, because, again, I know week one is week one. Still some things to work out here in the next coming weeks for a lot of teams. Still some chemistry, obviously, for Jared Goff to build with some of his pass catchers. But the Lions team that, for the most part, has played together for a couple of years, they've played well now. And that recent film against Todd Bowles, that recent game experience, I think is going to help them here in this case. So I kind of hope that, for the Bucs' sake, they aren't as blitz aggressive, but then you look at the reinforcements, what they have left along that defensive line, and that's asking a lot of your front four there to bring pressure without the blitz help. So I'm in a mixed boat about the blitz this week. Evan, what do you think?
Look, I mean, we talk about hoping Todd Bowles learns his lesson, right? This is the same guy that blitzed Matthew Stafford in the divisional round in 2021 with 30 seconds left. So I don't think he's going to change. Now, you talk about Jared Goff. Jared Goff has owned Todd Bowles. You talk about Jared Goff doing well against the blitz. Yes, and what does Todd Bowles like to do the most? Blitz. They've played each other, I believe, 4 times, right? Regular season and playoffs. Jared Goff has a 3-1 record against the Buccaneers. That's 2 regular season wins, 1 playoff win. In that regular season loss, that was in Jared Goff's, I believe, 2nd season. That was when the Bucs went to LA and beat the Rams. Jared Goff still threw for 517 yards in that game. So almost over halfway to 1,000 in the 2 games, and then he played the Bucs in 2020. He threw for 376 yards in a Rams win, and then last year in Tampa, Week 6 against Detroit, Jared Goff threw for 353 yards against Todd Bowles' Buccaneers. So Jared Goff has been very, very good against Todd Bowles, and Todd Bowles not had an answer for him. And I think one of the biggest reasons why is because how good Goff is against the blitz, and the Bucs just have not found an answer to get there with 4. And I think that's been the biggest issue for the Buccaneers against Jared Goff. And hopefully you can right the ship, but it's a slippery slope, because when you got a defensive coordinator that likes to do one thing, defensive coordinator, head coach, whatever it may be, when he likes to do one thing a lot, and you got a quarterback on the other side that just picks it apart, what you get is those numbers I just laid out a lot of the time. And if you're allowing, that was the Bucs, I believe, put up 55 points on the Rams that day in the win. I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be putting up 55 points on the Lions here. So, yeah, the Bucs defense is going to have to find some sort of answer to slow down Jared Goff here.
So I think that there's, a sticking point here with your defense and this blitz. Obviously Todd Bowles has a history of blitzing. It's no secret. It's just who he is. It's who he was as a defensive coordinator. It's who he is as a head coach. It's just what he likes to do. But I think that there's a glaring issue here, and that's your DB room. I think you mentioned it, Rhett, where you said he doesn't have the blitz help. Well, you're not going to have potentially this, Antoine Winfield. You might not have Kalijah Cansey. Your DBs have taken a hit over the weekend, and you can't blitz if you don't have anybody on the back end to cover, right? Because that's where, like the Rams just proved it. You can blitz us all you want. You can send as many guys as you want. If I can get that ball out and get it to an open receiver, we could turn chunk plays into big plays. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what offenses are learning now. It's, you stick back in the shotgun, 2-3 step drop, balls out. As soon as you land on that back foot, balls out. And that's where Jared Goff was one of the best and has been one of the best against the blitz and under pressure. Yes, he has his games where, he's really off, right? And it just doesn't go his way. But when it comes time to make a play, Jared Goff, for some reason, just seems to just succeed. And that's why I'm not really worried about the blitz. But I really think, we're also going up against a top-tier offensive line, and everyone's really healthy right now. Penei Sewell's the only one that's got a banged-up ankle. I just don't know. You guys tell me. Who are you going to match up against mano a mano? If you were to work your way from Penei Sewell all the way down to Taylor Decker, where do you feel your biggest matchup right now is on defense?
Probably the interior. A guy like Vita Vea is definitely going to command double team attention, but then you're relying on your edge rushers, your Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, your Yaya Diaby, who has been a stud, led the team in sacks last year with 8.5 in his rookie season. Didn't play a quarter of the year and still had 8.5 sacks. So he's definitely a stud, and I think he'll bring the pressure. He looked okay. Felt like he had a quiet week 1, but he was popping up on film, had a lot of good pressures that week. So, I think it's a lot to ask this Bucs front four to try and overpower an offensive line like this. But, if Vita Vea can try and bring some interior pressure, and a guy like Yaya Diaby can step up, or even Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who had an impressive week 1. We've been waiting on him to have an impressive game for years now. If he can consistently step up the way he was last week, then you're counting on those guys. But there's not a lot of matchups where you're going to, as a Bucs fan or a Bucs analyst, you're looking along this defensive line. There's not a lot to love here, especially with the injuries that you have. And I think, these guys getting off of the field on third down as well is going to have to be something they do, because, they'll be worn out by halftime if Detroit can effectively control the clock here.
Has Yaya Diaby been more of a rotational player? Because he was only in about 50% of the snaps this weekend, but he had pretty solid efficiency numbers. So Is he always been, since he's only in his year 2, but has he been a rotational player? Is that somebody that, is looking to get more snaps? I guess, where do you see him fitting in the defense, long term? Is he someone that's going to be more of a, 3-down kind of guy?
He didn't play at all in the preseason, had some injury concerns. So I think that's part of the reason he didn't have as heavy as a workload in week 1. But yeah, I think the Bucs are kind of putting their chips in the pile with this guy and expecting him to evolve into something that can be, I guess, a sustainable edge rusher for Tampa Bay, because we've had a lot of decent edge rushers, a lot of really good players along that Super Bowl defensive line. But now you're relying on a lot of young talent. And again, you're asking a lot of a second-year outside linebacker, but I think the ceiling is there, and I think the Bucs see that, and I think they believe in this guy. So I think by the end of the year, he's going to be chipping into that snap count a little bit more. But Evan, your thoughts on Yaya?
Yeah, I do agree that one of the reasons he did play as little snaps as he did was because I think he's still trying to get back into that form, right into that, because he missed all training camp, all the preseason. The injury happened very early in camp. There was actually a fear that he was going to be out longer. There was a fear that maybe he wouldn't be ready for week 1, but luckily he was able to be. The Buccaneers obviously signed Randy Gregory. Randy Gregory never shows up. They released Randy Gregory. So, yeah, they've been searching for answers along that defensive line, more specifically in the edge rusher group. They drafted Chris Braswell in the second round this past season. Yaya Diaby last year, though, did start as more of a rotational guy. It wasn't until about week 12 or so that he took over as the starter full time and then went, the rest of the season as the starter. So they're hoping, a guy like Diaby can take that next step this coming season. And I thought he looked decent on Sunday. He had a few pressures. He's able to get in the backfield. Jane Daniels really elusive, able to get away. And hopefully, he'll be able to continue to get healthy and continue to play well for them, because he's a guy that, especially in an edge room that is a little bit weaker, I think he's a guy they need to step up.
So, hold on here. Let me get back to my notes. Hold on a second. My page just flipped on me here.
Oh, you're good. I get it. I've been there.
Where did it go? Here we go. I was looking at snap counts again, and in Chris Braswell. So I'm excited about Chris. I'm just not excited he's not on the Lions team. What are your overall thoughts on Chris so far, week one? I noticed that he was only in about 34% of the snaps or so. How has he been through this offseason? Because clearly I haven't paid a ton of attention to what he's done. He was in 42% of the snaps. What are your thoughts on Braswell? One is a pass rusher, right? Two, just, where is he fitting into this defense right now?
I think he's another one of those guys that's going to find himself chipping away at the snap count as the season goes on. The Bucs have a lot of high hopes for him as an edge rusher, but right now it's kind of just harnessing that raw potential. Like, he's still a very raw player. He does a lot of things well, great speed of attack at the point of attack. And I mean, he's got a couple of nice moves for a rookie pass rusher. So more young talent along that defensive line that the Bucs are kind of hoping blossoms sooner rather than later. So I think, fans might be a little impatient down here because, the development of an edge rusher is always tricky, but I like him a lot. I think, he'll kind of grow to be a more consistent player over the course of the season. But I think just like a lot of these young guys, as the year goes on, we're going to see more of them.
So game stat and score predictions. We're coming up to an hour here. What do you guys think is going to happen in this game? Have you looked at the lines yet by Vegas? Do you follow Vegas lines, or do you follow your gut and what you're really seeing from the players week to week?
I typically, I'll pay attention to the line. I know it opened at 6.5, and now I think it's up to 7.5. I mean, to me, it makes sense. I mean, the Bucs' best defensive players out. Their starting right tackle's probably out. So I understand why the line movement there. I mean, Tampa with the points is a little tempting, I would think, but I don't really base my predictions based on that. I do think that Vegas is usually pretty close with these things, but I don't really base my score predictions on that. But yeah, the line has been moving in the Lions' favor more so as the week has gone on.
Yeah, Bucs money line plus 275. We do a quick series every week on the YouTube channel, betting the Bucs, and last week Evan was 4-0. So
wow.
Don't let him misguide you. He definitely pays attention to Vegas a lot more than you think.
Well, I went 6-10 on just straight up calls. It was the worst week I think I've ever had, but it was week one, and it's always a bad week because you just don't know what you're going to get. In the last 4 minutes of every game really screwed me up. So let's run down the list here. Mike Evans, is he over or under 100 yards on the weekend here against the Lions?
Flat 100 yards? I'm going to say under.
Evan?
I'm going to agree with under as well, yes.
All right. Chris Godwin, is he going to be, and I don't know what the lines are. I haven't looked at any of the prop bets or anything. So Chris Godwin, do you think he's going to be over or under 100 or potentially the leading receiver for the Bucs this weekend?
I think he could be the leading receiver. I think there's a chance because he was very impressive to me last Sunday. It looked like he was his 2019, 2020 self. I think it's the best he looked in a little bit. He could be the leading receiver. I don't know if he's going to go over 100 yards though, but wouldn't shock me if by the end of the day he's the Bucs leading receiver.
Okay.
My take as well.
Sticking with offense here, I really liked what you guys had in Bucky Irving. I mean, this guy is like, hurry up and pick him up on your fantasy league because you just don't know what's going to happen with Rachaad White. If Rachaad White goes down and Bucky's inserted, I mean, what an opportunity for fantasy players right now. What do you think about your run game this weekend? Are you going to get above? My call is this. I don't think that the Bucs, you can love it or hate it, probably hate it. I don't think the Bucs are going to get more than 60 yards on the ground. Total combined between the two running backs. Just seeing what I see with our defensive line, and if we are this healthy and inserting DJ Reader, I mean that's kind of where we live is keeping teams under 80, but over an average of a season. Last season I think we were like 79 or somewhere in that range, but I just don't see it happening this weekend. You guys, your offensive line's hurting quite a bit. You're probably going to call the over, but what do you think? It's a crazy call for me to think that we're going to keep them under 60.
No, I don't think it is. I am going to call for the over, but that's because they're getting 75 yards combined. I don't think it's going to be a strong week for the Buccaneers run game. I would like to hope that Bucky Irving brings a little bit of a different element. You know, if he has a couple of burst plays, maybe you can shift momentum later in the game. Last week against Washington, it felt like he was getting more effective as the game went on. So depending on the situation the Bucs find themselves in, maybe that's the case this week, but I don't have a lot of hope. You mentioned the offensive line being banged up. I don't have a ton of hope for them controlling the game on the ground this week. I don't think it happens.
What do you think?
I am also going to say over, but yeah, it's not going to be over by much. It's not going to be over by much. They didn't really have much success on the ground game, and this was a game that they were leading for most of the time against Washington, and they still didn't have a ton of success. So in a game where they might be down, I'm not saying they're going to be down multiple scores, but there's going to be some times where maybe they don't have the lead. They're going to have to put the ball in Baker Mayfield's hands a little bit more. I just don't think you can rely on the run game, especially against the Detroit front that's very good at stopping it.
So Baker took 4 sacks for 30 yards in the playoff loss. With another improved Lions defense year over year, another year for Aiden Hutchinson, a banged up offensive line. Is Baker going to be able to evade the onslaught of this defensive line this weekend? How many sacks do you think Baker takes, if any? And just how bad of a day do you think Baker could have if your offensive line does stay banged up through Sunday?
Oh, this is making me sick. I don't think it's going to be great. I think he will evade the pressure for so long, and then I definitely think there's going to be plays. The fact of the matter is the Detroit Lions from top to bottom are a better football team than Washington, and the defensive line in particular. This is a pass rush that is going to be able to finish plays a little bit more effectively than Washington did. And yeah, week 1 sloppiness is going to play a factor. I think both teams may have a couple of mistakes here in week 2. Still the early going, but if he has to run around as much as he did last week, I think they're going to get him on a few of those plays. So I think we'll see probably at least 2 or 3 sacks.
So for the Lions fans listening and any Bucs fans listening right now, the reason why I wanted to have these guys on is because I watched their podcast this week. Probably some of the most realistic fans out there. Great channel. They tell it like it is. I mean, you don't get all the homerisms all the time, right? Phenomenal work by these two guys. So when you listen to what, Rhett like saying it's making me sick because he sees the writing on the wall. This is a hell of a matchup. Like, this is a great game. And I'll be there. Of course, I'll be there for it. Evan, what do you think about Baker's chances this weekend? It's just nice to hear for once as a Lions fan that we get a little bit of credit because we never used to. We've always been kicked while we're down 2 or 3 times.
It's going to be a challenge, and like you said, Aiden Hudson there. Marcus Davenport is a player I've liked for a long time. When he's healthy and available on the field, he is a force. A really good player, like you mentioned. DJ Reader making his potential debut, and that's not going to help either. The Buccaneers' offensive line, and then you have the potential starting right tackle, out. The Bucs are hoping their offensive line has improved too from last year, though, from that playoff game. Obviously drafting Graham Barton, they hope the center position is improved. They hope another year of development from Cody Malk at right guard. They're hoping that improves him. They retain Tristan Wirfs, obviously. I still do think it's going to be a challenge. And, yeah, I think 2 to 3 sacks is sort of that right number where Baker may actually avoid a few, where it could be like 5 or 6 maybe. I'm not saying he's going to be pressured all day long, but I think Detroit is one tough football team. I think they're built well in the trenches. And, I foresee – a struggle for the Bucs offensive line, especially if it gets into a situation where the Bucs are in obvious passing situations. The Bucs go down 10 points, and all of a sudden you have to start passing it. Then those pass rushers can just pin their ears back and just go. You don't have to there's no threat of a run game there, right? There's no real threat of anything there. You know what the Bucs are going to be doing, and I think that's where you can run into even more trouble.
It's going to be interesting to watch. For myself, I'm concerned about Levante David. This guy's always shown up. He is one of the best linebackers in the game. He had 13 tackles, a sack, and 2 TFLs against the Lions in the playoff game. I mean, just a crazy good game for that guy. Carlton Davis had a good game. Had 7 tackles in that game. McCollum had a good game, 6 tackles in that game. Who else had a sack? Kalijah Cansey had a sack in that game. Jamel Dean had 3 passes defense. So it's not like you don't have some really good playmakers that are still on this team, for this game, upcoming, that are healthy, that can play. It's just going to be a matchup, man. It is rematch or sequel, whatever you want to call it. Number 2, back in Detroit, playoff atmosphere all over again, and home field advantage, which we didn't even touch on. What do you guys think about the Lions Ford Field, man? And with the craziness that you guys are hearing, the decibel records, and, we're traveling everywhere now, but coming to Ford Field is like, nobody wants to play there now. Nobody. We show up and we show out. So what do you guys think about the home field advantage? How difficult is it to play in an environment like that, for Baker, or for anybody, really?
Yeah, I definitely think it matters. It's crazy how just a couple of years ago, I don't think we would have ever talked about Detroit being, a team with a home field advantage. But you put a winning product on the field, the fans show up, they show out in force, they support their team. You love to see it. But yeah, it is a huge factor. We talked about Todd Bowles' defense, and I think a huge part of that is guys communicating on the field, yelling back and forth at each other, yelling coverages or assignments, substitutions, things like that. Any audibles that have to be made, like, those guys got to hear. So I think when you've got a raucous crowd, especially when it's indoors, that could be an issue for the Bucs. You're already down Antoine Winfield Jr., who does a lot of that communication as well. So not only are there going to be a couple of guys who might be in different spots with some, terminology coming from a different player, but you're playing a tough team with a tough crowd on the road. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a factor for sure.
Well, I'm ready for it. It's going to be a hell of a game. You guys have been great tonight. I appreciate you staying on for the whole hour. Hope to talk to you guys again soon, maybe come playoffs. And I'm sure we'll see each other again come playoffs, because the Buccaneers got a good team, and you guys are going places. Lions are finally going to be hopefully 2-0 again. We'll see. It's going to be a great game. Appreciate you guys coming on. Any final words? Please plug everything for yourselves. So, other Lions fans can catch your pregame shows and everything for the week, and what you're doing, for the Lions. And Glover Quinn on tomorrow night, right?
Yeah, we got Glover Quinn going to be live with us tomorrow, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. That'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you miss it, you can always watch it after the fact, or you can listen on any major podcast platform. But yeah, I'm excited. This should be a good matchup. I know we've kind of been doom and gloom when we compare these two teams. I know it sounds like we don't have high expectations for the Bucs, but I will say the Bucs have had a little bit of an identity this last year and a half of exceeding my own expectations. Yeah. They've exceeded a lot of people's expectations. There was a point after the Houston loss last year where I don't think they were going to sniff the postseason, and they played really well, went 6-2 down the stretch. Ended up losing to a really good Lions team, 1 game away from the NFC Championship. So while they are banged up in a couple of areas, I do think there are certain things about this Bucs team that has improved since the last time these two teams have played. And to be honest with you, as a Bucs fan, you're grateful that you're playing a team like this early in the season. One, because you can potentially take advantage of early season, shenanigans, I guess we will call it. But 2, it's a great litmus test for where the Bucs want to be. I think most NFL fans could agree that the Detroit Lions are a top 3 team in the NFC. A lot of people have them as the top pick for the NFC this year, and they deserve it, right? They've earned that right. Made it all the way, deep playoff run last year. They got a good coach, good team, good quarterback. Like, they're playing great football right now. So if the Bucs can play a competitive game, if they can play their brand of football and they can hang tough with a Lions team like they did in the postseason, then I think you're going to have a lot of people who, they're obviously upset about the loss, but if you can take something away from it, I think it's going to help the Bucs in the long run. But score prediction, I think it's going to be a lot of offense. I think we will see points scored, but I do have the Lions coming out on top. I'm going to go Lions 34, Bucs 28. I just think, I think at some point they'll fall behind, and it'll be too little too late by the end of the game. Evan, what do you think here?
So you had 34-28 Bucs cover.
Bucs,
yes,
yeah, would cover.
I do think Bucs cover. Bucs plus 7.5. It's hard to not.
Yeah, I mean, just like Rhett said, I know it does feel a lot of like doom and gloom, right? Like we're talking here, like the Bucs are going to get just blown out of the water here.
Well,
We don't necessarily think.
To be fair, Evan, injury reports suck. They suck.
Yes, they're not fun. And but the Buccaneers right now, they're a banged up team and going on the road in a hostile environment, a place that is tough to play regardless. And it's not going to be easy. I also do have the Bucs coming up short. I have the Lions again. I just don't really know if it's kind of a way. I'll believe it when I see it. When I see Todd Bowles finally have an answer for what Jared Goff can do. So far, he hasn't. So until he shows that, I can't really believe it. I think the Lions are going to score, I'll say 33, and I think the Bucs score 26. So in this scenario, the Lions do cover. But I think it's a pretty competitive game from start to finish. I think this is a game where the Bucs give the Lions quite a fight, but they just pull away at the end. Just a little bit too much, I think, for the Bucs right now, for the especially a banged up Buccaneers team on the specifically on the defensive side of the ball.
So, I had the Lions scoring 34 in this game, but I've got to change that now because Rhett took it. So I'm gonna have to go. Man, it's tough. It's really tough. I'm going to have to go Lions put up 31. So 4 TDs and a Jake Bates field goal. Lions put up 31 to the Buccaneers 17. I'm rolling 17 again. Lions are going to keep a lot of these teams under 20 points this year, I feel. I think that this is another opportunity that the Lions could do that. Unless something crazy like a safety happens, I'll go 31-20 again. I like 31-20. That's my final answer. It is going to be a heck of a game. Look, this is going to be a tough one out of the gates. I think that this game is won in the second half. If the Lions can't get things moving right away in the beginning, I'm not going to be worried about it. I think the Bucs are going to come to play with their defense. They're going to get after it early. I think that Chris Godwin is going to cause some problems. I think Mike Evans is going to cause some problems. Matter of fact, I'm more worried about Carlton Davis on who he's going to match up well with. I know he knows both of these guys well. He knows Evans a heck of a lot more. Maybe there's an advantage there, but who's the advantage to, right? Evans knows Davis's weaknesses and vice versa. It's a tough matchup. If the Lions don't bracket down Evans and force Godwin to beat us or something, that could be a problem with this young defense. And we didn't really talk about the Lions defense per se, but Terry and Arnold, very young rookie, handsy, couple of PIs in the first game. This is a game that could get out of control going up against Chris Godwin, or if he had to be, up against Mike Evans, it could get out of control for him. He might not be able to handle the pressure. He could get too handsy too quickly. And look, the NFL is going to call it. And they're going to call it more often than not on a rookie. He will not win the benefit of the doubt against Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in this game. So I hope that he can contain it. My biggest fear is Aaron Glenn and that he stays into a zone defense. If he stays in some sort of a zone, we're going to be in trouble. We'll be picked apart across the middle like we have been. They've got to get into a man press situation and play these guys tough off the line, jam them off the line. If they can do that and get their hands on Evans, which is a very tall order, that takes Baker off his game, right? You've got to slow Baker down at least a third of a second to allow that defensive line to work. And that's the difference between a sack and a touchdown in this league, is a third of a second. That's it. So it's going to be an exciting game. I'll be there. And then of course, I appreciate you guys coming on tonight, being part of the Rock Down Detroit Lions pregame show for Tampa Bay and Detroit Lions at Ford Field at 1:00 this Sunday. We'll talk to you guys soon. You guys have a great show tomorrow with Glover Quinn. And again, appreciate you. Have a great night.
Adam Schefter at ESPN says there's 275,000 people.
Well, that was some party in downtown Detroit. 775,000 people shattering the NFL draft attendance record.
This is the future.
All grit.
Evolution. This is the future.
All